Ever get the feeling like there's like a whole other game going on underneath, like beneath all the news and the noise and the headlines?
Oh, absolutely. Like there are these deeper currents driving things.
Yeah, currents, exactly. And they've got different rules, way higher stakes. It's like that feeling you get reading Curtis Yarvin, especially this essay, Victus.
Man, that title alone, woe to the vanquished. Talk about setting the stage.
Brutal, right. I mean, right away this isn't going to be a feel-good story. And it's Roman, right?
Well, ancient Roman. Fitting, given how Yarvin sees power, very gladiatorial, no mercy.
Zero. And this essay dropped December 2020. I mean, talk about timing.
Weeks after that election, still so raw for people.
And Yarvin, the guy behind the Gray Mirror blog,
yeah,
he's not exactly known for holding back,
Let's just say he's got a way of cutting through the BS.
Spicy takes is what we usually call it.
And Victus is no exception. He dives right into the 2020 election, but he's not interested in, relitigating every detail about fraud. He's after something bigger, I think.
Okay, so what is it then? If not the actual ins and outs of the election, what's he focused on?
He's trying to expose the real source of power in America, or at least what HE thinks is the real source.
All right, now you've got to give me a hint. If it's not the voters, not the courts, who's calling the shots, according to Yarvin?
He'd say it's not so much about individual players, but a whole system. Rigged, in his view, for a certain kind of outcome.
Rigged. Okay, so how does that play out in the real world? Give me an example.
He uses this analogy of American elections being like a water polo match, on the surface, all very civil, right?
But underneath.
Brutal, I get it. Exactly. He's saying don't be fooled by appearances. There's a whole lot more going on beneath the surface.
Okay, I'm liking this analogy, I gotta say. So unpack that for me. How does Yarvin tie that into, the mechanics of an actual election?
He points to our voting systems, for one, the lack of transparency, He actually compares the U.S. to Albania on election security, which, when you think about it...
Kind of wild, right?
He even calls the U.S. Albafornia at one point. He's a funny guy, I'll give him that. But he's dead serious about how vulnerable our elections really are.
So it's not just, hypotheticals about fraud. It's deeper than that, a lack of accountability baked into the whole thing.
Exactly. He's saying because the system's so opaque, you could never really prove or disprove anything definitively, which I guess is kind of the point.
And that's what makes it so unsettling. You start to wonder, what are we not seeing? Where are the blind spots?
He actually uses this kind of detective novel approach to lay it all out, which I thought was interesting.
Oh, I like that. So it's like he's presenting us with a mystery.
Yeah, exactly. He lays out the motives, the means, the opportunity, but he stops short of naming the culprit outright.
Which, some people find frustrating, but I kind of love it. It's like he's saying, here are the pieces, you connect the dots.
Exactly. And he gives us some pretty compelling clues to work with. One thing he points to is that massive swing in the election prediction markets just before the results came in. I don't know if you remember that, but...
Oh, how can I forget? It was like watching the mood of the entire country do a 180 overnight.
Right. And that's what makes Yarvin such a sharp observer. He doesn't just traffic in, anecdotes or speculation. He's pointing to a real quantifiable shift. And it makes you wonder, what the hell happened in those crucial hours to cause such a dramatic swing?
Okay, so we've got this shadowy system where the rules are unclear, massive swings in the polls right before the finish line.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's kind of giving conspiracy thriller.
Right. You're on the edge of your seat waiting to see who the big bad villain is going to be.
Exactly. But then Yarvin, he did something kind of unexpected. Instead of pointing fingers, he brings in this whole other layer, the gigaphone.
And this is where I think things get really interesting. We're not just talking about the mechanics of voting anymore, but something much bigger.
Okay, so walk me through it. What is this gigaphone and what's it got to do with, anything?
It's how narratives get shaped, how consent is manufactured almost. Who controls the information, who gets to decide what we see, what we believe. That's the gigaphone, that overwhelming force of media and institutional messaging.
Okay, yeah. When you put it like that, it's kind of ominous. And he is not shy about calling this stuff out, is he? Especially when it comes to the New York Times.
Yeah.
Ministry of Truth. Come on, man.
It's strong language, for sure. But it gets to the heart of what he's saying about the gigaphone.
But Jesus.
That it's powerful, scarily powerful. He points to the Times, but really, he's talking about the mainstream media as a whole. It's not just what we read, it's how we think.
It shapes the way we see the world, basically.
Exactly. And if you don't play by their rules, well, you get crushed. He even compares the media to, like, the Praetorian Guard in ancient Rome.
Wait, the Praetorian Guard, those were the emperor's personal hitmen, right? Or, well, protectors, I guess.
Both. And that's the point. They decide who or what to protect and who to eliminate.
So is he saying the media gets to decide who's in and who's out in our society?
It's a pretty provocative argument, I'll give him that. But I think it highlights the danger Yarvin sees in, like, an unaccountable media. Too much power concentrated in too few hands, you know?
Right. Okay, but here's where I bump up against this a little bit, because a free press, I mean, that's essential, isn't it? To hold power to account, speak truth to those in charge. How do you square that with this idea of a controlling, all-powerful gigaphone?
Yeah, no, I get that. It's a tension he acknowledges. Like, in theory, sure, free press is crucial. But in practice, he'd say it's become something much more insidious.
Insidious, huh? So it's not just failing to live up to its ideals, it's actively working against them.
I think that's what he's getting at. That instead of challenging power, they often end up reinforcing it.
By amplifying certain voices and silencing others.
Exactly.
It's like he's saying they're not just reporting the news, they are the news. Or at least they get to decide what gets to count as news.
And that brings us to his take on the Supreme Court, which is even more unsettling, I think.
Really? I mean, you'd think they'd be the ultimate check on power. Aren't they supposed to be, like, above it all?
Right. But Yarvin argues that even the Supreme Court, even they answer to the gigaphone in the end.
No way. So you're saying that justices, they're swayed by public opinion too, or at least by whatever version of public opinion the media decides to amplify.
It's like this giant echo chamber, and nobody's immune, which is terrifying when you think about it. And it's why he's so critical of, like, the conservative legal movement.
You mean those groups that try to influence policy through the courts?
Exactly. He basically says they're playing checkers while the other side's playing three-dimensional chess.
What does that even mean?
He's saying they're focused on winning legal arguments while the gigaphone's busy shaping the whole board. The terms of the debate, the language we use, the very way we think about these issues, it's all been influenced by this force that they don't even realize they're up against.
So if the courts are compromised, the media is calling the shots, and even voting itself is, well, we've already talked about voting. It's a pretty bleak picture, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is there any hope, according to Yarvin? Or are we all just screwed? So, where do we go from here? Because honestly, after that last part, I need a little optimism. You know, is there ain't a light at the end of this tunnel, according to Yarvin?
Oh, there's light, but it's not like sunshine and rainbows. It's more like learning to see in the dark.
Okay. How do we do that?
By understanding the power of narratives, which is something he talks about a lot. He calls it, get this, dream politik.
Dream politik. Okay, now that sounds kind of cool, I gotta say. Like something out of, I don't know, William Gibson novel or something.
Right, but it gets to the heart of how political movements actually work, I think.
So break it down for me. What is dream politik exactly?
It's the way political movements, they tap into those big, deep desires we all have, right? The hopes, the fears, the longing for something more, something better. Think about, like, Trump, Obama, even Reagan.
They all sold a vision of the future, a story.
Exactly. And people connected with those stories on a gut level. It wasn't just about policy details. It was bigger than that. It was emotional.
And make America great again. I mean, you talk about dream politik, right? Whether you loved it or hated it, you can't deny how powerful that message was.
Absolutely. And Yarvin would say that's where Trump really got people. It wasn't his policies. It wasn't even like his personality. It was that dream, that yearning for a simpler time.
Right. Going back to some, like, idealized version of the past.
Exactly. And millions of people bought into it.
But then, and this is where it gets interesting, Yarvin talks about how the media, even while they were criticizing Trump, they were also kind of inflating him. You know, it's like that old saying, don't wrestle with a pig. You both get dirty, but the pig likes it.
Oh, man, that's a good one. And that's the thing about dream politik. It can cut both ways, you know? The same forces that can lift you up can also
destroy you.
Exactly. And it's not enough to just tear down the bad dreams. You have to offer something better, something more compelling.
So what you're saying is it's not just about the facts, the policies, the case. It's got to be about something more.
Yeah, something deeper. It's about storytelling. It's about tapping into those primal emotions that drive us.
Man, Yarvin, you sly dog. So that's what we're left with. We got to get better at telling stories if we want to. What changed the world?
That's the challenge he lays out, yeah. Because if we don't, Someone else will tell those stories for us.
And we might not like the ending. Well, on that cheery note.
Maybe cheery isn't the point, right?
True enough. Sometimes you got to go deep into the darkness to find the, well, maybe not the light, but at least a different kind of light. So, thanks for joining us on this little journey, folks. If you're still listening at this point, I salute you.
We'll leave you with one final thought from Yarvin himself. We'll need better dreams if we want to fix what's broken.
Think about it. What are those dreams? And how do we make them real? Until next time. Ever get the